Well, good morning, everybody. We had a little interesting morning so far, and part of the reason is that we were trying to live stream the Courtney Clenny hearing this morning, and apparently there's no streaming sources that are interested in streaming the Courtney Clenny case. So I'll still keep looking out for it, and if they do actually stream it or it gets posted at someone's channel, so I'll definitely take a look at it. And if I'm not able to live stream it, so then I'll just watch it, do a recap video, as some of you like. So we'll do that. In the meantime, there's actually another trial that's starting today, which is an interesting trial, and it's actually going to be a bench trial. So it's a bench trial in the case of Laken Riley. Laken Riley was a nursing student who went on a jog and was found dead. So this is the trial that's starting right now. We're going to live stream it. They're starting with opening statements, and it's a bench trial. The defendant has waived a jury trial, which is an interesting choice. And the defendant only speaks Spanish, and that's why you'll see him with the headphones on throughout the trial. There's an interpreter there. So he's going to be listening to an interpreter, but he is charged with a number of charges, including murder, for Laken Riley. So I see it starting now. I'll keep my eye out for the Courtney Clenny stuff. And if something pops up, then maybe we'll switch back to the Courtney Clenny, whatever you guys want. But in the meantime, I think this is going to be an interesting trial to tune in for. And it's Friday, so let's sit back. Let's watch a little trial, have some comments, try to address them. And right away, we have Lorna McKenzie. Hello, Brother Counsel. Congratulations on reaching 10,000 subscribers. Yeah, we did reach that milestone this week, 10,000 subscribers. So appreciate all of the support out there. We're definitely trying our hardest to do something novel in this space, and hopefully people are appreciating that. So appreciate all the love and appreciate all the congratulations. Let's keep it going. Let's hit 100K in no time, and yeah, we'll keep it going. So thanks a lot. All right, so let's pull up the trial. We'll start the trial right now. Thanks all for joining on such last minute notice. We were looking forward to Courtney Clenny, but if you can only join us now for this other trial, it's also an interesting trial. So I'll be here. Let's sit back. Let's enjoy. I'll add some of my commentary if I feel it's necessary, something interesting. But again, it's a bench trial, so definitely interesting. So let's pull it up, and we are about to start with opening statements. And again, opening statements is very different when you're talking to a judge as opposed to a jury. You know, all the flamboyance and all that stuff, sometimes it gets toned down when you're talking to the judge because the judge doesn't always fall for all that stuff. So we'll see how things are a little bit different when it is a bench trial. So let's pull it up and let's get going. I'm just going to speed it up just a drop. Okay, just a drop. Don't kill me.
Court, counsel. On February 22nd, a hoodie-style jacket and some black kitchen-style disposable gloves, and he went hunting for females on the University of Georgia's campus. And in his hunt, he encountered 22-year-old Laken Riley on her morning jog. And when Laken Riley refused to be his rape victim, he bashed her skull in with a rock repeatedly. That is what this case is all about. The evidence will show that Laken fought. She fought for her life. She fought for her dignity. And in that fight, she caused this defendant to leave forensic evidence behind. She also marked her killer for the entire world to see. The forensic evidence that he left behind in this fight is his DNA, and only his DNA and Laken's, underneath Laken's right fingernails. He also left behind in a struggle with her over her phone, because the court will hear that she called 911. He left behind his left thumbprint on her iPhone, which was found not far from her body at the crime scene. And it is that forensic evidence alone that would give you enough evidence to find him guilty as charged on the counts in this indictment. But the evidence in this case will come in basically three forms. There'll be forensic evidence. there will be digital evidence, and there will be video evidence. And all three forms of those evidence will point to one person, Jose Ibarra, as the killer of Laken Riley. And this is not working. We'll start with a timeline, and the timeline is established by a lot of the digital evidence that you're going to hear about. And for Laken, that timeline begins basically at 9:03 in the morning. At 9:03 on Thursday, February 22nd, Laken Riley did something that she does all the time, and she went out for a morning jog. She lives not far from the crime scene, and Your Honor is going to see several maps in this case, and you will see that where Laken Riley lived, where the defendant lived, where our other victim who you're going to hear from in this trial, Tasia Sweet, lived, Building S at the University of Housing, at University of Georgia Student Housing, and where items of evidence were dumped in this case and where Laken was murdered. It's all clustered together. And it's all clustered together within about a half-mile radius of one another. And you'll see several maps throughout this case. But she left her house at 9:03 in the morning. We know that for several reasons. She was captured on her Ring doorbell, and you'll see that video through our first witness. And she also was captured on a trail cam that becomes very important in this case. And at about 9:05 a.m., she's captured running from her house down Rogers Road, eventually towards the crime scene where she encounters this defendant. She is running, as you will see, with a few things that are important. 2 AirPods, and they are noise canceling AirPods, and her phone, her iPhone, is in her left hand. She's wearing typical running clothes, and you're going to hear a little bit about how she runs, what she runs with, because these things are important to judge what eventually happened between her and this defendant on the trail. She wears typically very tight running clothes because that's what's comfortable when you run, so it doesn't get it doesn't come off or get loose when you're running. And so this particular day, she's wearing running tights, white Hoka shoes, and 3 layers of clothing on her top. She's wearing a running bra, a shirt, and a tight black linen running jacket when she leaves her house. At 9:11 a.m. exactly, Laken is a few minutes into her run, and we have some digital data, which we'll talk to you about, which is a Garmin watch that Laken had gotten for Christmas that she's wearing on her run. And this watch captured a lot of important data that you're going to hear about. But she is on her run, and her phone, she activates the emergency function of her iPhone. And you're going to hear about that through testimony of the witnesses who examined her phone. She activates the emergency function of her iPhone, and she attempts to call 911, and she, in fact, does call 911. Her call is connected to ACCPD. At 9:12, you'll hear that the call was hung up, and I'm going to play the call for you. At 9:12, the call was hung up by the caller, not the 911 center. The 911 center did not hang up on Laken Riley. The phone hung up. And at 9:12, they tried to call her back, and there was no answer. This is an enhanced version of the 911 call, and there will be several stipulations between the parties in this case. We will execute a waiver of them as they come in. One of the stipulations was that this 911 call was sent to the FBI in Quantico, where they attempted to enhance the call. And this is a 1 minute and 8 second call, and this is the enhanced version of that call. And I'd like the court, when listening to the call, right about 55 seconds into the call, you're going to hear a voice.
Clark County 911. Hello, this is Clark County 911. Hello, Clark County 911. Can anyone hear me? Clark County 911.
Yo Tango. There is a long break in what happens next. It was Laken's mom, who Laken usually talks to on her run, who started calling Laken at around 9:06 that morning. You'll just see the call logs from that and the evidence of that through Laken's phone. And when she could not reach Laken, she began calling Laken's 3 roommates. You'll meet all 3 of them: Lily Steiner, Sophia Magana, and Connolly Huff. All 3 of them are University of Georgia students at the time. They were all seniors. And Laken herself was at UGA, but had recently transferred to the University of Augusta Athens campus because she wanted to be a nurse. But the four of them still live together. And the roommates are all, I would say, technologically savvy and security savvy. And they all four had iPhones. And there's a function with an iPhone called Find My iPhone.
Okay, so just to catch everybody up on what happened so far, this is the opening statement of the prosecutor. This is a bench trial. And what happened so far is Laken Riley was running through the woods, and she got into a struggle with an individual who the prosecutor is saying is the defendant. And during that struggle, this defendant's DNA is going to be found under her fingernails. Very, very strong incriminating evidence. Also, she had an iPhone, and that iPhone is going to have the defendant, in this case, his thumbprint on that iPhone. So some very, very damaging evidence to the defendant. Now she's going through the fact that there were some 911 calls that Laken Riley made at 9:11 in the morning, 9:12 in the morning, but she did not talk. So she called 911, 911 answered, and she didn't talk at all. But there was some sort of voice that maybe you can make out in the background of one of the phone calls. And now she's talking about Laken Riley's roommates at the time, and she was a student at the her roommates had a function on the phone, which is Find My iPhone, which most likely is going to be that these roommates figured out that they're able to find where Laken Riley was. And this was around 11 o'clock in the morning. So 9 o'clock in the morning, she's going for that drive. 9:11, they call the police. She calls the police, 911. And now we're talking at 11 a.m. where her roommates are starting to get involved.
Which you can share your location with other people. And the four ladies in that house, roommates, shared their digital location with one another 24/7. And so when Allison Phillips, Laken's mom, began calling and looking for Laken, she notified all the roommates. And then the roommates started checking the ring camera, checking for Laken, texting Laken, calling Laken, and no response. I will say that this particular day, February 22nd, 2024, happened to be the day where there was a widespread phone outage by AT&T. And so some of the girls did have AT&T as their service provider. Laken did not. She's Verizon. And so the girls were having phone problems due to that widespread outage. And so you'll hear about how that kind of interfered with their ability to really find where she was. But eventually, they could not find her. They could not find her for hours. And even though Laken would go out on long runs, she always had her phone with her. So they became concerned. So at around 11:30 on the day of her murder, two roommates, Sophia and Lily, went and walked the trails back behind the intramural field at the University of Georgia where Laken used to run, but they also had her digital profile. And her digital profile put her in the middle of the Oconee Forest, and they had noticed that she had not moved. She had not moved for hours. And so they walked to where they could last see her digital profile, and the two roommates found one of Laken's AirPods. They photographed it, they collected it, they went back to their house where they could have Wi-Fi to connect because they had no phone service in the forest and an outage was on. And at 12:05 p.m., they called the University of Georgia police and reported that Laken Riley was missing. So it isn't until the police respond immediately. And they take that digital profile, and you'll meet Sergeant Maxwell. He is the officer that found Laken's body. And it takes him, even with her digital profile, this is a very forested area. And she obviously wasn't on the running trail. She was off the running trail. And it took him about 25 minutes, even with her digital profile, for him to locate her. And he did locate her. And you're going to see the body cam footage of him locating her. And what he found when he found her is that she was hidden, kind of almost under a tree, covered up with a bunch of leaves. The first thing he noticed was that her breasts were completely exposed. All three layers of her top clothing were pulled up above and around her neck. He also noticed that her running tights, which she typically wears above her navel, were pulled down. Her underwear was protruding from her tights. He also noticed severe injuries to the left side of her head. He began immediately trying to save her life, but he could tell that she was dead. She was cold. But he began CPR, and you will see the efforts of him and several other University of Georgia police officers where they try to save her. They have to move her out of this area so that they can get her flat on the ground. They give her chest compressions. They give her CPR. They put those pads on her chest to try to start her heart. Eventually, the fire department and EMS comes and they do the same. They work her for several minutes, but she is dead. She is dead. There was nothing they could do to stop it or help her. You'll see the crime scene measurements. The crime scene in this case was worked by the GBI in conjunction with UGA PD. You will hear in this case from GBI, UGA PD, FBI, and ACC PD. The four of them really in conjunction worked this case. And the crime scene, importantly, when they get there, there's really very few items there. But item number one, where you see on the trail, is the other AirPod that Laken was wearing at the time she was running. And then they saw a disturbed area of leaves to a point where they found two rocks and a tree, both of whom have, or all three of which have Laken's blood on them. And then Laken's body was a few feet away from that, where you see the green there. And then her phone was not found near her body. It was found where you see item number 8, which is the other tree that you see there. But her person was taken 64 feet off that. So from where AirPod is, item number 1, to where you see items 2, 3, and 4 is 65 feet. So in legal terms, he aspirated her 64 feet off of that trail so that he could attempt to victimize her. This is the crime scene. You'll see how wooded it is and why it took Sergeant Maxwell so long to find her, even though he did have her digital profile. And in here, this photo is actually the phone. And so it took them a really long time to find the phone. They were calling the phone, they were pinging the phone. Her phone was on silent, so they couldn't hear it. I mean, it wasn't until it got dark that they could find her phone, but they kept looking for her phone because they knew the phone was there. And they found it. And when they found it, this is what Daniela Stewart of the GBI saw on her iPhone, exactly where your thumb would be if you go to hang up the call on the iPhone. So at the bottom of the iPhone, she found this latent print in blood. They processed the phone immediately, and that latent print was sent to ACCPD. And we'll talk about that a little later. And here's some of the Garmin data. And there are some things that we will never know about exactly what happened between Jose Ibarra and Laken Riley on that trail, but we know enough. And what we know is that at 9:10 a.m. from her Garmin that she was wearing, as she is trucking along and she is clipping 7-minute miles, she's running, doing her thing, listening to music, something happens. He does something to her to make her stop dead in her tracks. She initiates the SOS function on her phone and calls 911, and she immediately stops. And after that, you'll see some of this Garmin data, her movement, because it went to the FBI CAS team. They're the ones that analyze it, and you'll hear about it. She's on this trail with this defendant for about 4 minutes, and then you see 4 minutes later, her Garmin moved 65 feet into the woods, and there's some additional movement of her along that time, and her heart rate is still going until 9:28 a.m. Her encounter with him was long. Her fight with him was fierce.
So it seems like she was running, and the first time she called the cops was at 9:11, and then there's still evidence of her still being alive at 9:28. So that was a pretty long struggle. Exactly what was going on there, that is to your imagination at this point. But that was a long time for there to be a struggle.
And that is what the Garmin data shows. And once her heart stops at 9:28 a.m., there's no more movement from her Garmin. So what happens next? Well, UGA PD leave, and they really got nothing other than a peeping Tom incident that had occurred on campus at 7:57 a.m. And we'll talk to you about that one last. So what they do is it is a combination of good police work and luck, pure luck. But they start dumpster diving. ACCPD is dumpster diving, UGA PD is dumpster diving, GBI is dumpster diving, FBI is dumpster diving. Everybody is just looking into every dumpster in the Athens area for anything because they had nothing. And at a dumpster, at an apartment complex where he lived, a police officer named Zach Davis of ACCPD finds this hoodie jacket. And when he looks in and sees it, it's in a recycling bin, and it's standing out because it's right on top. And he noticed it had long, dark hair on it, wrapped around one of the buttons, and he could see blood. And he thought that was suspicious. So he calls UGA PD. They respond at 9 o'clock on the day of Laken's murder. They collect the jacket found in the dumpster, and they send it immediately to the GBI Crime Lab indicator for testing. But while they're there, they notice, they look around and see that one of the residents in this apartment, and B32, had what's called a UV camera, which is like a ring camera that looks a little different, had a camera aimed at that dumpster. And so they asked the resident that night, hey, can we come in? Can we see your camera? He agreed to let them see it. And this is what they saw. At 9:44 in the morning, about 15 minutes after Laken Riley's heart stopped, this is what they see. So they saw an individual who they did not know who it was at the time, dump the jacket in the dumpster and go to those bushes there and dump something there. So they go to the bushes, and this video has been enhanced, and I'm sure you're going to hear a lot of testimony about this video, enhanced the best they could by GBI Cyber. And I know the court sat through some motions to suppress where this black Adidas hat, there was a lot of discussion about, and you're going to hear more about all of those things. But this is an image that they locked in on and began to circulate around the neighborhood, or as the cops call a bolo. Be on the lookout for this individual. They didn't know who he was, and they circulated that. But they did go also that night, still the night of February 22nd, to the bushes, and they found 3 black disposable kitchen gloves. And those gloves were also sent immediately to the crime lab. And one of the interesting things about the black disposable gloves when they got to the crime lab and they were analyzed, this is a picture taken at the crime lab, is that on the thumb of the gloves, there was a hole. There's also other holes in the gloves, and they found them. But on the thumb area of one of the gloves that the crime lab examined, they found a hole. And they also found blood, and that blood was later to be determined to be Laken Riley's blood on those gloves. So I've already told you about the geographic locations. They're all clustered. You can see in this map, the crime scene is at the top in the middle, called body crime scene. The dumpster where the items were found is marked. Building S is right by the bus stop, and then Laken Riley lived further up, Millage Avenue towards the top of this photo. But the distance between the building S, which will become important, and Laken Riley's body is about 300 yards. The distance between the dumpster and Laken Riley's body is about 500 yards. And the distance between the dumpster and the bus stop and where the defendant lived, because he lived in that apartment complex, is about 150 yards. Everything is close together. So what happened next in the investigation is that the very next morning on Friday, February 23rd at 8:32 a.m. as ACCPD, again, is just looking out for anything. They had the bolo at that point. They encounter a person named Diego Ibarra. And Diego Ibarra is wearing a black Adidas hat that had some interest to them, which is they believe to be the identical hat that they had seen in the video the night before. And I will tell you this, on that hat that Diego Ibarra was wearing the next day is Laken Riley's blood. So their theory that that was in fact the same hat was absolutely correct. So they encounter Diego Ibarra. He gives them a fake green card. They know it's fake because it has 2 different dates of birth on it. And so they ask him to go back to his residence and they begin talking to him. UGAPD arrives and they begin to take over the scene. From the information that they had gotten from Diego Ibarra, they knew that hat was a hat seen in the video because of the proximity of the crime. And at some point, Diego began telling them he's got brothers in the house sleeping, and there were many communication difficulties at first because the first responding officers did not speak Spanish. No one in this apartment, D126, could speak English. So at some point, UGA brought 2 of their Spanish-speaking officers on scene, and the communication became a little easier. Officer Bridges, Officer Sand, both of whom were native speakers of Spanish, arrived and began taking over the communications. When they get there, they are attempting to secure the residence for a warrant. And before they could do a security sweep to secure the residence for a warrant, Argenis Ibarra, who's in the middle in this slide, comes out with a garbage bag in his hand. He eventually gives officers consent to enter the residence. And when Sergeant Epps enters the residence, he sees Jose Ibarra asleep in the bed. And that is how he's been identified in this case. You will see there are 5 residents that lived in apartment D126. Jose Antonio Ibarra, this defendant, also goes by the name of Victor, which will be important because a lot of the communications within his phone and some of the witnesses just call him Victor. So Jose Ibarra is Victor. It is in fact the same person. Diego Ibarra is Jose's brother, goes by the name of El Gocho, is a nickname that many people, including this defendant, call him El Gocho. Argenis goes by Manny, and Rosbelli Flores Bello goes by La Gorda, and then Juan Carlos Diaz Hernandez, they call Carlito. And I suspect the state will tell you right now, you're going to hear from Rosbelli in that residence. You will also hear that all the residents, Diego, Argenis, and Rosbelli, at least those 3, are currently in federal custody on some immigration issues. But we are going to produce Rosbelli to testify to the court about the things that she saw and observed that day. And it is Rosbelli who identifies Jose Ibarra from the dumpster video. The officers, when they saw Jose Ibarra that day, saw that he had many injuries to him. Scratches on his arm, scratches on his wrist, scratches on the back of his neck, scratches on his hands. And they photographed those injuries to him. And then they began to do an additional canvas of this entire apartment complex. There are multiple buildings in this apartment complex, A, B, C, D, and E. multiple teams of agents began going around looking for cameras, talking to residents. What do they know? What do they not know? And one of the things that they found is that the Ibarras lived at D126. Right next to them is D125, and right next to D125 is D124. 124 had a ring camera, 125 had a still camera. And they went and collected videos from those two apartments. And importantly, on the day that Laken Riley was murdered, at 10:21 a.m., Jose Ibarra is captured on D124 coming out of his apartment with a bag, and now his clothes have changed. He's wearing different clothes than he was wearing about 40 minutes ago. And he has a bag in his hand, and he's walking towards a dumpster, another dumpster in their apartment complex. And that dumpster, by the way, had been emptied the day of the murder. So when the officers went to check that dumpster had nothing in it for them. But in the next door neighbors, still camera shot at 10:24 a.m., 3 minutes later, Jose Ibarra is walking back towards his apartment, empty-handed, nothing in his hand. So they searched the residence that day, and they found a few things of significance. Number one, they found 3 more black disposable kitchen gloves, which were sent to trace evidence for plastics and polymer examination, and they concluded that they had originated from the same source as the gloves that were recovered in the bushes. They recovered 2 of the defendant's Samsung cell phones, which you will hear some evidence out of, but they also found no bloody clothing, no bloody anything, and the shirt and the satchel that you see the defendant wearing in the video, the dumpster video, were never found. They're not in that residence. So what other forensic evidence? The parties will stipulate to the prior Daubert hearing that this court has heard, so we will not be recalling the fingerprint evidence, but we will have a stipulation with the transcript and all of the exhibits that thumbprint, latent print that was on the phone, was sent to ACCPD that night. And eventually, the digital image of that thumbprint on Laken Riley's phone was compared to Diego Ibarra, Argenis Ibarra, Rosvelli, and Juan Carlos, and they were all excluded. They didn't leave that thumbprint behind. It was matched to this defendant, Jose Ibarra. It is Jose Ibarra's left thumb on Laken Riley's phone. And the analyst or the expert who did that analysis testified at the Daubert hearing. He showed the court 15 points of comparison that he found, and his results were peer reviewed by another examiner. They were peer reviewed blind, and she agreed with him. There's also DNA in this case, and you're going to hear about 3 different types of DNA: traditional, YSTR, and true allele. All true allele is probabilistic genotyping, but it is a computer software program that deconvolutes or separates complex mixtures of DNA. That's what true allele does. But before you can go to true allele, you have to start with traditional DNA. So all of the items of evidence that you're going to hear DNA results from started with the traditional DNA. They were swabbed, they were amplified, they were quantified, all the things that you do with regular DNA. But we do have some regular DNA results in this case. First and foremost, the jacket. The jacket found in the dumpster has blood on it. And in the blood for traditional DNA is Laken Riley's DNA and this defendant's DNA. And only the 2 of them, Jose Ibarra and Laken Riley's blood, are on the jacket that he dumped in the dumpster. The rocks and the trees from the crime scene, they were also processed for DNA, for latent prints, and for everything we got. But on the rocks in the tree, just Laken's DNA, Laken's blood on the rocks in the tree. They attempted at first, which is protocol, to do what's called YSTR DNA testing on Laken's fingernails. So both her left and her right hands were swabbed by the medical examiner in this case, and they were both sent to DNA for analysis. YSTR is a better fit for trying to separate male and females because only males have Y chromosomes. And so they attempted YSTR first, and they were successful. The problem with YSTR, and the officers did gather the DNA of Jose Ibarra, Diego Ibarra, and Argenis Ibarra. They are brothers. And blood brothers share the same paternal line, and they share the same YSTR profile, unless there's a genetic mutation. And what the lab found when they tested the fingernails of Laken Riley is that, first of all, the left hand, there's nothing. No DNA of any other person other than Laken. But on her right hand, there was male DNA. And for the YSTR testing that they tried first, Jose Ibarra could not be excluded as the donor of that YSTR profile, and neither could Argenis, because, again, they're blood brothers. They share the same YSTR profile. But Diego could be excluded. And that's because Diego carries a genetic mutation that the lab was able to see, and he was able to be excluded as the donor of YSTR profile underneath Laken's nails. But after the YSTR was done, it was then sent to True Allele, along with a lot of other items. And when True Allele tested, and the data was sent into the True Allele program, it didn't test it, but when the data was sent into the True Allele program, True Allele excluded Argenis as the donor. True allele excluded Diego, who had already been excluded by STR anyway, but true allele matched Jose Ibarra to the DNA underneath Laken's right fingernails. To this likelihood ratio, which I have before the court here, 10 billion times more probable than a coincidental match. I'll tell you the gloves that were tested, that's all just Laken's blood, the black gloves that were in the bushes. There's a straw that was tested, that is the defendant's blood. I want to talk to you about that a little later. And then the hat, the black Adidas hat, is also Laken's blood. And then the jacket also did contact swabs. So in addition to the blood on the jacket, it did contact swabs that were sent to True Allele. And again, it's the defendant and Laken on the jacket. But importantly on this dark blue jacket, also Laken's hairs that were wrapped around the button were sent to trace evidence. They are consistent with Laken Riley's hair. And of course, it's consistent with her long dark hair and all the microscopic analysis on it. Her DNA is on that jacket, so there's really no need to do DNA on the hair because her DNA is already on the jacket in the form of blood, but they look microscopically at her hair and it's consistent with her hair. But the important thing they found about several of the hairs, I believe over 15 of them, is that they were forcibly removed from her head. They did do a sexual assault kit on Laken, and several things were tested. But the bottom line is her entire sexual assault kit was negative for male DNA. Her clothing was looked at with AP, P30, you'll hear about that. There's no semen present. However, her underwear was sent to the trace evidence section as well, where they concluded that her underwear had been forcibly torn. So the medical examiner, Laken was sent to GBI headquarters in Atlanta or Decatur, where Dr. DeMarco conducted an autopsy on her the very next day after her murder. What the medical examiner found is that Laken had a complex depressed skull fracture on the left side of her head. And she had 8 other lacerations in the left side of her head, which literally look like holes. She had a small subarachnoid hemorrhage on the right side of her head. And she had multiple abrasions to her face, her neck, and her torso. She also had what's called petechia in both eyes, which is consistent with some form of asphyxia. And asphyxia can come in many forms. It can be a drowning, but most importantly in this case, it can be a form of strangulation. It can be manual, it can be ligature, it can be all kinds of things. But what the medical examiner said in this case is that Laken Riley died as a result of the effects of blunt force trauma to the head and asphyxia in OS, not otherwise specified. She can't really say if it was from chest compressions, maybe manual strangulation, but there was something going on in this struggle where this defendant deprived her brain of oxygen for long periods of time. And that was her cause and manner of death. But I want to talk to you about something that happened before, and it is count 10 of the indictment, and it's a peeping Tom. Shortly before 7 a.m., Jose Ibarra is seen on a trail cam, and this is a version of the trail cam, or this is the angle you'll see. And you'll see an individual, and the state will be the first to tell you this video quality is not fantastic, but there's more than just this video. You'll see an individual wearing a dark hoodie, eventually a dark hat, black gloves, and holding a styrofoam cup. And UGA attempted to enhance this video. GBI Cyber attempted to enhance this video. This is about as good as it gets. You can see a bag. They've studied this video 1,000 times. You'll hear the things that they saw in looking at these videos. The male is seen on the trail cam exiting the defendant's apartment complex. That's how he gets onto the trail. It's further beyond outside the scope of this exact clip. But he gets on through a path from the defendant's apartment complex to the trail that leads onto campus. And this is Rogers Road. This is UGA Village housing for graduate students. And this is a bus stop that's used by students to take the bus to get to a class. At 7:01 a.m., this individual is seen at this door that you're going to see in the bottom or the middle of your screen. That's apartment 114. And in that apartment, 114, building S, lives a graduate student. She's an Indian national. Her name is Tejaswi Sarathi, and she is here at the University of Georgia studying. This defendant is seen trying to open her door at 7 o'clock in the morning. And there's about an hour's worth of video that was watched by UGA PD that between 7:01 a.m. and 7:57 a.m. on the 22nd day of February 2024, about 70 minutes before Laken Riley is murdered, this defendant goes to the door of apartment 114 6 times. Twice they can see on video that he attempts to open her door. And at one point, you'll see in the video where he ducks down. And that is because at some point, the student inside heard him at her door, and she approaches him at the door and says, "Excuse me." And she will testify to this court that when she said that, she's looking at her peephole, he ducks down. And you can actually see that on the video. And just here's a portion of her 911 call where she calls at 7:57.
I was in the shower and then I got some notification to check that someone was starting the peephole. Someone was trying to open the door, and then I said, "Excuse me," and then they just ran away, and then all the time they kept trying to look through my window. I said, "Okay, what's going on?"
So she says she was in the shower and she heard her door jiggling. And she said that somebody was at her door. She says, "Excuse me," he ducks down and he tries to look through her back window and does look through her back window. This is her back window. This is the backside of Building S, and this is exactly how it was that morning. This is body cam footage of Officer Bridges, who's one of the officers that responded. Her blinds are open wide. They're open, not only open, but they're pulled up more than halfway. The right side is her living room. The left side window is her bedroom, wide open. Her blinds were that morning. She said that's how she kept it because it was kind of a dark place, and it was more comfortable for her to have some light in. And that's how her windows were. And she said when she turned around, she could see the person who she can't identify. We'll be the first to tell you she can't identify him. She didn't get a good look at his face. He had that hat over his face. He had a hood on. She describes the clothing, dark hat, dark jacket. Didn't get a look at his face because when she looked through the peephole, he ducked down, but she could see him peeping into her window, looking into her window. So the FBI CAS team is a specialized team with federal government that analyzes digital evidence. And they were brought in this case to look at data from the defendant's phone, the victim's phone, cell phone records, all of these things. And some of the data that they got from the defendant's cell Samsung, one of them, which is 1B7, which you'll hear a lot from, is called Rubin data. And Rubin data is something that's collected by Samsung. And the FBI CAS team analyzed Rubin data, looked at the Rubin data in this case. And at the time of the peeping at Tasia Swee's apartment, the defendant's 1B7 phone is right over her house. And these are the digital points by the FBI. But also, there is a white styrofoam cup. In the video, you can see black gloves and the white styrofoam cup of the peeping. This cup was found by UGA PD as they were coming onto the trail to come to Laken Riley's scene. They thought it was unusual because there's no trash out there usually, and it's just sitting there. They collected the cup, and you can see in this next image, if you see where the retaining pond is, the cup is down, was this white cup. That white cup was collected and sent to the crime lab at the GBI, and it is the defendant's DNA on the straw of that white cup in between the two crime scenes. So also out of his phone and out of his social media, the defendant, when he woke up that morning, kind of did us a huge favor and started taking pictures of himself. And here are the pictures that he took of himself and posted on Snap, and also can be found in his phone. And one was taken at 4:30 a.m. The second one was taken at 5:37 a.m. And you see that one that he is wearing the black Adidas cap with the stickers on it, with the same jacket, with the hoodie. Also, he took pictures of himself wearing the same shirt that you see in the video of B32 and the bag that was never found that you see on the side of him in some of the videos taken on the day of Laken's murder. And also you can see from, again, D124 and D125, the day before the murder, he is wearing the evening before the murder. So this is the 21st at 9 p.m. He's wearing the same clothes. So in the end, Your Honor, that is a summary of the evidence that the case, summary of the evidence that the state has in this case. You will hear forensic evidence. You will hear digital evidence. You will see videos, all pointing to the same conclusion, that this defendant murdered Laken Riley, and he also peeked Tasia Swee's apartment. At the close of all the evidence, we are going to ask that you find him guilty on every count of this indictment, because the state will be able to prove every bit of it. We ask that with your verdict, the close of the evidence, that you bring justice to Laken, Tasia Swee, this community.
Wow. I don't think I can say better than Blurry Lights. Very strong opening. And really starts questioning what exactly is the defense going to say. I mean, there's such strong evidence. There's Laken Riley's blood on the hat that he is seen wearing, very distinct hat. It is an Adidas hat, so maybe they're going to argue, very common hat. They may argue that there's a lot of hats like that. It's got her DNA on that hat. Got her DNA on the garbage, on what he dumped in the garbage, her sweatshirt. So yeah, really seems like very strong evidence. I really wonder what the what the response is going to be. So let's see. I mean, sometimes the defense will just get up and say something very quickly. Well, Your Honor, or to the jury, really, just keep an open mind. There may be some other possibilities here. But if they actually have more of a longer opening statement where they can explain away some of these things, so then yeah, this is a bench trial, by the way, Mark. This is a bench trial, which is very interesting. And what sometimes I find is that if you're going to try to attack forensic evidence and DNA evidence and this type of evidence, where you can kind of hope that you can confuse a jury with this technical science type of arguments that you can make, and they don't really understand it as well. They don't see it as much. So when you have something like that, it's very technical, it's very scientific. You may do better with a jury than you will with a judge, because the judge has seen a lot about DNA, a lot of forensic evidence, and he knows he's not going to be confused, and he's not going to be tricked by a persuasive defense attorney. So when the evidence is mostly scientific, you have a better chance most likely with a jury. When the arguments are much more factual, then you may actually have a better job with the judge, because the judge sees a lot of these type of cases and understands when there's a factual question which can then be determined to be reasonable doubt. So I don't know what went into the conversation here, why they wanted to specifically have a bench trial over a jury trial, but just my approach to this would be that if the evidence is much more scientific, then you would probably prefer a jury to try to, as a defense attorney, to try to convince them or confuse them some way of the science that they don't really understand it, and then maybe they'll decide that there's reasonable doubt, as opposed to a judge. So I don't exactly know why they chose it this way, but we'll see. Let's see what the defense has to say for their opening statement.
Thank you.
Judge, the evidence in this case is graphic and it's disturbing. What happened to Laken Riley is graphic and disturbing, and it is a tragedy. The loss of any life that young and apparently full of promise is a tragedy. And I'm sorry that the family is having to go through this and be here for the presentation of this evidence. People have used this case for their own personal gain, financial gain, political gain. And while this process has its place for testing evidence, it's very poorly suited to healing hearts and minds. So it's the evidence that we have to talk about. And the evidence in this case is very good that Laken Riley was murdered. The evidence that Jose Ibarra killed Laken Riley is circumstantial. The evidence that anyone had any intent or certainly committed any sexual assault is speculation. Most importantly, in this case, you'll hear.
Now remember, in terms of the sexual assault, the rape kit was negative. The only evidence they have for that is that her underwear were torn.
No evidence that a sexual assault was committed. You'll hear nothing from the GBI, the FBI, UGAPD, ACCPD, that after looking at all of the evidence in this case, scouring for anything that could help prove this allegation in the state's indictment, that they found any biological evidence, that would suggest that, any physical evidence that would suggest that. There's no injuries that are consistent with a sexual assault. And in this case, it's an effort to explain a tragedy, but it's not based on evidence. The evidence that Jose Ibarra killed anyone is circumstantial. The state's presentation in their opening had a lot of detail about information, again, that showed that this event happened. But upon a closer look at the evidence that links Mr. Ibarra to that event, it is lacking. You'll hear that his phone was in the area, and you'll hear that the cast team that ran the locations of this phone. And there is good evidence that the phone itself was in the area. What you'll also hear, though, is that when they looked into this phone, when they did a close examination of who was using this phone, it wasn't just Jose Ibarra. It was other people in that apartment who were using this phone. And that comes through an investigation into the accounts that were used through this phone, and also from people who met other people associated with this phone who had used the phone to message people. And so while the phone was there, that's true. It doesn't show that Mr. Ibarra was there. You'll hear that Mr. Ibarra's fingerprint was on Laken Riley's phone. But you'll also hear that he was wearing gloves, supposedly. And that this hole that was supposedly in the gloves that they found would not have left that mark. You'll hear that someone in that video, in the so-called dumpster video, was wearing an Adidas hat. That's true. When they find that hat, and specifically the hat that was tested in this case, it was worn by Diego Ibarra, not Jose Ibarra, Diego Ibarra. And you'll also hear, and the state will ask you to consider different types of forensic evidence and to suspend your understanding of how that evidence is evaluated. Because while they will say that Mr. Ibarra's DNA was present at the scene, what they'll tell you is that without this software that we can't test, this proprietary software used by the GBI, without that, their expert wouldn't have been able to say whose DNA it was. She wouldn't have been qualified to testify about whose DNA that is. So they have to use a machine. And they're going to ask you to trust that machine where the human being isn't good enough. But with this fingerprint, they're going to ask you to trust a person because a machine isn't good enough. When they run those fingerprints through the database of fingerprints where they know Mr. Ibarra's fingerprint is, it doesn't come up. And so while a machine is good enough in one situation to try to convict Mr. Ibarra, it's not good enough in another. And it's this kind of gymnastics that it will take to tell the story with this circumstantial evidence. We waived a jury trial in this case with the hope and trust that despite the nature of this evidence, that you could come to a verdict that was not just a way of easing this family's suffering, but it was based on an impartial and honest assessment of the evidence in this case. If that happens and the presumption of innocence is respected, there should not be enough evidence to convince you beyond a reasonable doubt that Mr. Ibarra is guilty of the crimes charged.
Okay, so pretty short, kind of as expected. Sounds like he's going to try to throw it all on his brother, Diego. And here's the problem. The thumbprint, right? So you talked about the thumbprint for about half a second. there's his thumbprint, which is, they stipulated that it is Ibarra's thumbprint on that phone. Jose Ibarra's thumbprint on that phone. But I guess his argument would be, well, he was wearing gloves. If he's wearing gloves, then he can't put a thumbprint there. And then, well, there's a hole by the thumb. And then it sounds like his argument is going to be, well, his hole by the thumb, that couldn't have created this thumbprint that was there. Maybe he's going to argue that the hole wasn't big enough to create this large of a thumbprint. But again, it's very elastic. It can stretch and he can put his thumb through. And then when he pulls it back, it looks like a smaller hole. That's might be possible. So he didn't really explain so well about that if it's his brother who did this, then what happened with that thumbprint. Also, remember that Jose Ibarra's DNA was underneath her fingernails. So he didn't talk much about that either. So the hat is interesting. The hat may have been worn by both Diego, the brother, and Jose. That's possible that the hat was worn by both. And that's why some of the material inside the hat relates to Diego's DNA or his profile. It could be that Jose borrowed his hat for that day or the next day. They all live in the same house. And then his argument also is that the phone was not always used by Jose. Now, every time that I hear about this argument about it's a shared phone, a bunch of people use the phone. When for an adult, it's hard to imagine that. You know, sometimes maybe a family will have a phone that some of the kids can use together. But when you're talking about adults that are living in their own houses, I mean, everybody has their own phone. So anytime they start arguing that, oh, well, somebody else's phone, not that often that somebody will say, you know, can I borrow your phone for the day? I just want to use your phone today. And maybe they'll borrow it for a few minutes, but they're going to borrow it for the whole day. And then tomorrow I'll use that phone and then you use the phone. And then whoever you're texting or calling doesn't know who they're speaking to. I mean, it's not always that persuasive whenever I hear this, that the phones are just switched and used by whoever is in the mood that day. So, but his argument's going to be that it wasn't him. It was actually Diego who had that phone that morning. So try to take apart some of the evidence, but again, very, very strong case by the prosecution.
You may call your first witness.
Elmo. Thank you. Would you raise your right hand, please, ma'am? Do you swear from the testimony you will give today in the matter of the city court versus Jose Ibarra will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, self you got?
I do.
Okay, please take a seat. Spell your first and last name for matter court reporter, please.
My name is Lily Steiner, Lilly Steiner. How old are you? I'm 22 years old.
And where do you live? Not your exact address, but what part of town?
Currently,
Yes.
I live in Canton, Georgia.
And what are you doing right now?
I'm working as a medical assistant.
Did you go to the University of Georgia?
I did.
And did you graduate?
I did.
When did you graduate?
Graduated in May 2024.
And I don't know why. It seems like their microphone's not working. So I can't do anything about that. My volume was cranked all the way up. Seems like they're having some technical problems with the courtroom. So I don't know if that microphone's working.
While you were at the University of Georgia, where did you live and who did you live with?
My address was 1686 Village Avenue Extension, Athens, Georgia 30605. And I had 3 roommates, Conley Huth, Sophia Magana, and Laken Riley.
How long did the 4 of y'all live in that house together?
Conley lived with me for 3 years, and then Sophia and Laken moved in. We lived in that house for 2 years. I lived with Laken at the time of her death for a little over a year and a half.
How would you describe your relationship with Laken?
We were roommates, but the term roommates is an overgeneralization of our relationship. We our house was like a little family, and we called each other our family. We did everything together. We had family dinners, family TV nights and movie nights. It can brought a sense of joy to all of our lives that has been missing ever since. So
May I approach the witness, Your Honor? Henry, what's been marked for identification purposes is states Exhibit 1. Do you recognize the person in states 1?
I do.
Who is it?
Laken Riley.
And does it fairly and accurately depict Laken as she appeared in life?
Yes.
Statement to states Exhibit 1, request permission to publish.
Submitted, and you may.
So how old was Laken?
She was 22.
Where did she go to school?
At the time, she was going to Augusta College of Nursing, which had an Athens location.
What was she studying there?
Nursing.
Prior to attending Augusta College, had she attended the UGA?
Yes.
How long was she at UGA?
She was at UGA for 3 years before that.
Did you and Laken and your other roommates share each other's location?
We did.
Tell the court how you all did that.
So there's an app called Find My iPhone, Find My Friends, and you can request to have other people's locations, share your location with other people. So we did that with a lot of our friends.
Tell the court, where were you on February 22nd?
I went a few different places. That morning I was at our house, and then I ran a few errands, ended up back at our house, ran another errand, went back to our house.
Did you see Laken that morning?
I did not.
What time did you leave your house?
Around 9:30, I believe.
Okay. And when you left your house to go out, was Laken there or not there?
She was not there.
At some point, did you become aware that people were looking for Laken?
So I kind of had concerns of my own. When I left the house the first time, I wanted to go get coffee with Laken. I knew Laken was the only one who may have been home. Sophia was taking an exam and Connolly had class. And so I knew Laken might have been home. I went downstairs and I didn't see her sitting at her usual spot at the kitchen table. So I checked her location to see where she was. And I saw that she was on a run at on a trail that she typically ran.
May I approach the witness, Your Honor? I'm handing you what's been marked for identification purposes of States Exhibit 2. Do you recognize States 2?
I do.
What is States 2?
This is a screenshot from the app Find My Friends of Laken's location.
And is that how it appeared when you checked it on the morning of February 22nd of 2024?
Yes.
Statement of treatment, States Exhibit 2. No,
Two submitted.
and may I publish? Publishing States Exhibit 2. Could you tell the court what we're looking at here? Explain this to us. What is this?
Sure. So the LR is the initials of Laken Riley. You can see that at the bottom. And underneath her name is a rough just address, I guess, of where she was at. And then underneath that, it says now. This is the exact time of when her location, like the way that it updated, it would say now. So that was her location at that exact time.
And is that what you saw when you first checked it?
Yes.
Now, where is that location? And is your house in here as well? And other people? We see other initials. CH, MC, whatever.
Yes. So CH is Connolly Huth. That is my roommate. And so her location right there is at our house. And then MC, that is one of my other friends who lived further down the street.
And LR was Laken Riley.
Yes.
And where is that location that you saw her? Are you familiar with that location?
Roughly, yes.
Yeah. And when you checked it, what about the first time you checked it? Approximately what time?
It was about 9:30 from what I remember.
So did you again check it again?
Yes. So when I got home from my first set of errands, and I saw that Laken still wasn't home, That wasn't unusual because it was only about an hour after I checked her first location. So I thought maybe she was just still on a run. Checked it a second time around 10:45, I believe. That's a rough estimate. And I saw that it was in the same location. That did raise some concerns. So I texted Laken and just was checking in on her, and then addressing Connolly in a group message. I said, she's been in the woods a while.
Did you have a cell phone service that day?
So that day there was an AT&T service outage. So I was not, I did not have service if I was not connected to the Wi-Fi at my house. So if I left the house, I was not able to communicate or receive any communication.
So where were you home then? Approximately what time did you get home when you realized that she had not left the woods?
That was about 10:45. And then I ended up leaving the house again because I still wasn't, I just thought she was still on a run and there was maybe she was on the phone or something.
And then what time did you return again?
I would say roughly 11:30. I'm a little less familiar with what exact time that was.
When you got home at 11:30, was there anyone else home?
Yes, so I immediately pulled in and I saw Sophia standing outside with her dog. And I got out of the car and she just immediately said, can we go look for Laken?
And did y'all do so?
We did.
And what did y'all do?
So Sophia was a little bit more familiar with the trail. We walked down using her knowledge of the path that Laken would usually take on a run. And then when we got a little bit closer, we were using the Find My Friends app to kind of go directly to where her location was until we were standing kind of right around it.
When you were at the location where you felt that Laken was showing on her phone, did you see Laken?
We did not.
Did you see anything that you think may have belonged to Laken?
So when we were walking, Sophia noticed a lone AirPod that was sitting on the trail, kind of right around where her location was, and she picked it up, kind of assuming that it was Laken's.
All right, now I'll ask Sophia about that. At some point, did you all return home?
We did.
Okay, when you got home, what did you do?
It wasn't shortly after that we got home that I called 911, or not 911, excuse me, the UGA Police Department.
Many was marked for identification purposes as States Exhibit 3. Do you recognize States 3?
I do.
What is it?
It is the phone call that I made to the police.
And is it a fair and accurate recording of your 911 call that you made on February 22nd, 2024 at approximately 12:05 p.m.
It is.
when you recorded Laken?
It is.
State move to admit States Exhibit 3, request permission to publish. No objection. Your Honor, did we have to toggle back over so that you could hear it? I don't know the system like that.
Yes, we do.
We
Play it
do.
from the laptop.
Yes, sir.
I'm not sure. We'll see.
Yes, sir. Because I know it's playing, but I can't hear it.
Is that on HDMI? I don't know.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
12:05 seconds, February 22, 2024. Hi, we're calling because our roommate went out for a run at 9. Usually runs like through Lake Carrick behind grad housing, and we haven't heard from her. And we all just thought like service back, so we don't think it has anything to do with the outage. We went to go look to where her last location was, and all we found was an AirPod.
Okay. Hold on one second.
Okay.
You said last seen near the IM fields?
It's like behind the IM field, so we live near like grad housing, like building 8, and so it's the woods behind there.
Okay, have you tried calling her since you just got service back?
Yes, we've been here. Her family doesn't have AT&T for the one with the power outage, so they've had service the whole time, and her calls have been ringing through. We're just not getting answers.
Okay, where are you at right now?
We are.
I'm going to stop States Exhibit 3 at 1 minute in. Is somebody else also talking?
Yes. So I was
Go
having
for it.
trouble explaining kind of where Laken's location was, just because I wasn't super familiar with that area. So Sophia McGon, my roommate, took my phone.
Okay, are y'all together when you're making this call?
Yes.
At our house on Millers Avenue Extension.
Okay, are you able to come? Hold on, let's see. Can you come, do you know where the intramural field parking deck is?
Yeah, we can go there.
Okay, can you go there and meet the officers? What's your name?
My name's Sophia Magana.
And what's your friend's name?
The one, her name's Laken Riley.
12:07:43, second, February 22, 2024. What is your phone number?
The one that I'm calling from is 678-756-0513.
What's your friend's phone number?
Okay, I'm gonna ask you, do you remember Laken's phone number off the top of your head?
Kind of, but yeah.
Are you about to say it's 911?
Yes.
And is the number that you gave, 911, was that Laken's cell phone number?
Yes.
That we're about to hear?
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Let me look. 779.
Do you know if she has class or anything at this point?
She has it was, so that's her nursing. She does have to nursing school and she does not miss class.
12:08:43, second, February 22, 2024. How did you get her last known location? Was it from her phone?
Yes, they was updating, so that's why we're a little confused. But we didn't see her phone anywhere when we went. She hasn't moved for almost 3.5 hours now.
When you call her, does it go straight to voicemail or does it just keep ringing?
It keeps ringing. I'm on my way to the INC now.
Okay, that's fine. How long ago was it that you last called her?
I mean, like Saturday.
12:09:56, second, February 22, 2024. Okay, what kind of vehicle are you going to be in for the officers in for? How did she get there? Did she run from your house there or did she take a vehicle there?
She runs the trail. Her car's still at our house.
Okay, we've got officers on the way, all right?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Police, this is good.
Hi, my name is.
So after you made that 911 call, what did you do?
I drove to the field, the intramural field parking deck on UGA's campus to meet with the police.
And where did Sophia go?
So Connolly was in class. Sophia went to go pick up Connolly from class so that they could meet us at the field with the police.
And did the three of y'all meet there?
Yes.
And were the police officers there?
Yes.
At some point, did a police officer ask you if you could show him the location of Laken as it depicted on your phone?
Yes.
And did you do so?
Yes.
And the thing that you showed him, as it states Exhibit 2, what we've already looked at?
Yes.
How long did y'all have to stay there that day at the INC?
It felt like forever. I'm not sure of the exact amount of time, but maybe around 5 hours.
At some point, did the police ask you to show them the ring footage from your home where Laken had left out in the morning?
Yes, there were a few times that the police asked for different things, but I did show somebody at some point. Yes.
Yeah, first of all,
Yes.
Henny, what's been marked for identification purposes as State's Exhibit 4. Do you recognize it?
I do.
And did you put your initials and date that thumb drive?
I did.
What is State's Exhibit 4?
This is the ring footage from our front door of Laken leaving that morning.
And is it a fair and accurate recording of that ring footage?
Yes.
They would move to State 4, request permission to publish. No objection. Pause it quickly. Do you see, first of all, on State 4 that is now being published, the date and the time of this footage?
Yes.
Could you tell the court where is it and what is it?
It's in the bottom right corner.
And what's the date and what's the time?
February 22nd, 2024, 9:03 Eastern.
And who is that person that we see in State's Exhibit 4?
That is Laken.
After 9:03 a.m. on the 22nd day of February, did you ever hear from Laken again?
I did not.
Did you ever receive any text messages from her?
Not after 9:03. No.
Any calls from her?
No.
I'll pass the witness, Your Honor.
No question.
I don't have any questions for witness.
You should be excused.
Yes, sir, and she would like to remain.
You call your next witness. Let me just call you, go ahead and do this.
Sophia Madonna.
Sophia Magana. My plan is to take comfort breaks, 1 in the morning, 1 or so in the afternoon. I'll look for, sort of in between. So just let you all know that. If something needs to happen outside of that, let me know.
Yes, sir. May we take one absence for the county?
That's not, that'd be my plan, I agree.
Right hand, please, ma'am. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you will give in a matter of versus Jose Navarro will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Great. If you could please take a seat, and I know you are soft-spoken. Can you please move that microphone right close to your mouth so that His Honor can hear you and that counsel for the defendant can hear you? It's really important that you be heard, okay? And Madam Court Reporter is very close to you as well. She has to be able to hear everything you're saying because she's taking it down. All right. Spell your first and last name, please.
SOFIAMAGANA.
How old are you?
I'm okay.
Okay, all right. What do you do for a living?
I'm a teacher.
What do you teach?
I teach special education, high school, and the arts.
How long have you been a teacher?
4 months.
Where did you go to college?
I went to the University of Georgia.
Did you graduate
Yes, ma'am, in May.
of this year?
Yes.
Where were you living at the time of your graduation?
I was living in a house off of Village Avenue Extension.
Who were you living with?
Lily, Connolly, and Laken.
How long have y'all lived together?
I lived with them for 2 years.
I want to direct your attention to February 22nd, 2024. What were you doing that day?
I was taking my GACE exam for my certification.
How do you spell that?
GACE.
What is a GACE exam?
It's a test you're required to take to get certified as a teacher in the state of Georgia.
Were you allowed to have your phone with you when you took the test?
No, ma'am, I had to put it in a locker.
What time did you leave your house that morning to take the test?
Around 8:20.
When you left your house that morning, did you see any of your other roommates?
I saw Laken and Connolly before I left.
Where did you see them?
Connolly was on her couch and Laken was sitting at the table, and I spoke to them for a little bit.
When you left out, where did you go for the test? Was it on campus or elsewhere?
It was on campus. It was in Clark Hall.
How long were you there taking the test?
I got there around like 8:45, and I left maybe around 11:15ish.
When you completed your test, what happened?
I got my stuff. I got back in my car, and I drove back to my house because I didn't have service. So
When you say service, you didn't have what service?
phone service,
And why didn't you have phone service?
because AT&T had the outage that morning, and my provider is AT&T.
So what happened when you were eventually able to get service back on?
I got back home, and when I got service, I had some texts from Connolly, my roommate, asking me to check around the house to see if I saw Laken anywhere. And then once I got into the house, I got a phone call from Connolly and from Lauren.
Who's Lauren?
Lauren's Laken's younger sister.
After you got the call from Connolly and from Lauren, did you look for Laken?
Yes, I looked for her around the house, outside, in her car, kind of everywhere, every room, every corner, a few times, and I didn't see her.
What did you do after that?
I grabbed my dog and I decided to check her location on Find My iPhone, and then got my dog on his leash and started heading out to go towards her location.
Did you go alone? Did someone else besides your dog
No,
go with you?
Champ came with me, and then my roommate Lily.
Champ is your dog?
Yes, ma'am.
So where did y'all walk, and about how long did it take you to get there?
We walked down the trail that was like off the road, so it took us about no more than 15 minutes, I would say maybe 10, to get to where we thought.
May I approach the witness room?
Yes.
I'm showing you 3 exhibits at the same time. State Exhibit 5, State Exhibit 6, and State Exhibit 7. Starting first with State Exhibit 5, do you recognize that overall photo?
Yes, ma'am.
What is it?
It's a map of the trail.
And State Exhibit State Exhibit 5, no objection.
Not submitted.
State Exhibit 6 and 7, can you look at both of those?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you recognize both of those?
Yes, ma'am. The
What are they?
pictures I took when I found the nearby.
They very inaccurately depict what you saw on February 22nd, 2024.
Yes, ma'am.
State Exhibit States 6 and 7, request permission. No objection.
6 and 7 are admitted in the public process.
And maybe toggle back over on it.
Yes.
Starting first with State Exhibit 5, and I have a pointer that they you could use that has a laser on it. No one will be able to see that. Carter, can you see the screen if she uses a pointer?
I can, I've got it. You got the other one? Okay.
And that's probably better.
I think she's got it.
If you could show His Honor, what direction did you and Champ and Lily go, and where were you when you found an AirPod?
So we started here, and then right about here
At the end of the,
at Millage, where it
Millage
turned
Avenue?
into a sidewalk.
okay,
We got to the sidewalk, and then there's the train tracks like right here, and there's a little like trail that's just been walked over a lot. So we went down the trail, and then crossed over the train tracks, and then walked this all
around the
way.
retaining pond?
Yes,
on the
ma'am,
side of it?
around the retaining pond.
All right,
Had to stand up.
you may stand with the court's permission,
Yes.
thank you. But keep your voice up so Madam Court Reporter can hear you.
Okay, so we walked here, and then this is where like the main trail starts. So we got over here. There's like a turn. So we took the curve and stopped right.
Okay, so when you say there, is there a trail there?
Yes, ma'am. It's all a trail.
And
paved
that's
trail.
on the top right part of State's Exhibit 5. For the record, I'm just making a record for the court. Okay. Where within the trail, was on the side of the trail, the middle of the trail, where within the trail did you find the iPod? AirPod, sorry.
The AirPod was towards the left-hand side, but still on the trail.
And showing you, first of all, how did you find the AirPod?
Champ was sniffing a lot, and so I looked down because he was really fixated over a specific area where I kind of had stopped, and he was pulling. And then when I looked over, I noticed there was like a white AirPod. So
Right, State's Exhibit 7. What are we looking at there? And can you see the AirPod?
yes,
Can you point to it for the court?
it's right here.
The bottom of this photo.
Yes, ma'am. That's where I found the AirPod, or where it was when we got it.
And you said this is State's Exhibit 6. First of all, do we see Champ in State's Exhibit 6?
Yes, ma'am. He's right here.
All right, in the corner, the left corner of the photograph.
Yes, ma'am.
If you could use State's Exhibit 6, show us within the trail where you found the AirPod.
The AirPod was about right here.
Okay, where your shadow is?
Yes,
Or
ma'am.
a shadow of a person?
Yeah, my shadow.
Okay, thank you. While out there, did you see Laken?
No.
When you found the AirPod, did you look at it?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
Did you think it was Laken's?
I did.
And why did you think it was Laken's AirPod?
She always had a little bit more wax on her AirPods, so I noticed the earwax.
And was it also, did she have, what color were her AirPods?
They were white.
So did you collect it?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
And did you eventually give it to the police?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
Yes.
Amanda knew what's been marked for identification purposes, State's Exhibit 8. And I'm just gonna ask you to look inside this bag for me, and I'm gonna ask you a series of questions.
Okay.
Look inside that bag. Do you recognize what is inside State's Exhibit 8?
Yes, ma'am.
What is it?
It's her AirPod.
Is that the one that you picked up on the 22nd day of February, 2024 that you gave to the University Police Department?
Yes, ma'am.
And is it in the same or substantially same condition?
Yes.
State would move to admit State's Exhibit 8, request permission to publish.
Eight submitted and no published. Is it one? Just one?
Just one. After you found the AirPod, Ms. Magana, what did you do?
I took the pictures first just to remember. And at that point, I picked it up and I turned around to Lily and I told her we were going to walk back to call the police because we both didn't have service.
And did y'all do that?
Yes, ma'am, we did.
And then where did you go after the police were called?
I went to go pick up my roommate Connolly from her class, and then I met Lily with Connolly at the IM field deck.
And when y'all were at the IM field deck, did the police respond?
Yes, ma'am.
And did you tell them the information that you had gathered?
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Magana, did you receive any text messages, any calls, or any communication with Laken Riley after 9:03 a.m. on the 22nd day of February 2024?
No, ma'am. My last text from her was at 9:02.
May I have a moment with counsel, Your Honor?
Yes.
I don't have any questions for this witness.
You should be excused.
Yes, sir, and she would also like to.
Seems like they're getting all the roommates
10-minute recess.
out of the way. So it looks like they're taking a little recess now. So we'll pause it. All right. Well, those are the first two witnesses. Building up their case. Of course, it's going to be the forensics that are really going to seal the deal on this case, it seems like. And that's most likely what the judge is waiting for. So I'm going to go take a look at, see if I can find a Courtney Clenny stream. I'll do some work on that. I'm also going to maybe take a look at the motion again, the other arguments for the Sarah Boone. I know I broke down already the first two arguments that I put videos on, and when going through the case law, showing how the arguments don't really have some merit. And maybe we'll move on to the third argument and see if that has any merit. So maybe we'll do that as well. So for now, we're going to sign off from this trial. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. And I know it was kind of last minute because we're going to tune in for the Courtney Clenny bond hearing, which I think is going to be interesting. So I'm going to see if I can find that, maybe do a recap on that for you before the weekend. And also, just as a little bit for everybody that's here, since you've come here, next week is going to be a little tough for me. I'm going out of town next week. So I am leaving, and I'll probably be out till Thursday. So if I can get you guys something somehow when I'm away, we'll see if I can do that. If not, then I'll try to get something out today, try something on Sunday, and then hopefully when I come back Thursday, we'll have something for you guys as well. So thank you, everybody, for joining. Thanks for all the love. Thanks for the congratulations on breaking 10,000 subscribers. We got to keep it rolling. We got to keep raising the bar on how these trials are being covered, especially when it comes to looking up the case law. That's something it seems that's very missing out there, that, you know, take the time to look up the case law and explain the case law about a specific argument in a motion or a brief. So that's something that I'm going to definitely be concentrating on. And that way also everybody understands really what's going on much more than just simply me reading a motion to you and trying to give you a casual understanding of the law as I'm reading it. So that's kind of what the main focus of this channel is as well. So that's going to be it for now. Thank you, everybody, for joining. Thanks, Buttercup. Thanks, Blurry Lights. Thanks, Lorna McKenzie. Thank you, Rita, Natalie Pirani, Elizabeth Hughes. Thanks for everything, and we will see you guys next time.